Yes, well, I was starting to say that having learned from Felix about the work, Felix van Dijk, about the work that was done in Germany by Jewish scientists in the 1930s, and they escaped to England, and knowing the work that was done in Cambridge, I was not surprised to hear that the Hiroshima bomb was a nuclear fission. So it looked as if the war was over, but we did have secret radios in our camps. We knew what was going on. We knew that the end of the war was nigh for Japan after the second Battle of Midway, which was June of 1943. We were aware that the Japanese home fleet did not leave the Sea of Japan until quite late in the war. And as I say, the second Midway battle was won with the aircraft by the Americans with the aircraft carriers that were not in Pearl Harbor on the 8th of December 1941. So it was no surprise that the war was nearing an end. It did come as a surprise to a whole lot of people, including the Japanese physicist Yukawa, when the second bomb was a plutonium bomb. In other words, at Los Alamos they had bred plutonium, which is 94-239, an even odd isotope, and was also transuranic, which was fissile. So we woke up at cycle camp, not at 3 o'clock in the morning, but the sun was up, and it was obvious that something was on. It took some time for the Japanese in Java to realise that they, like us, had also capitulated. And that was settled when the Emperor sent down one of the imperial household to Count Yamaguchi to bring a wire copy of the rescript. I met Yamaguchi and I heard the rescript, and I've seen the reaction of the Japanese when they hear the imperial voice telling them that they'd capitulated. And it's curious how quickly they can accept a national consensus. And they then thought that they had an obligation to protect us from the Indonesian nationalist movement. But most of the Australians that I knew were in favour of Merdeka. Merdeka means freedom, and there's a word in Bahasa Indonesia, tetap, which is not transferable into English. And we got out of the camps with our slouch hats on, and we were recognised as Australians. And this is a beautiful hat. Served me all the war. And if we met an Indonesian who said Merdeka, we'd scream tetap, or if we spoke first, it would be Merdeka, tetap. Then when Mountbatten sent his sloop down to Tanjong Priok, and Les Boyden went down to operate on one of the seamen there, I think. Anyway, the three Indonesian leaders, Sukarno, Hatta, now they were both above ground during the war, and Schwaria was underground, but he surfaced. So the three of them went down to the Mountbatten sloop. What's happening? We're here to take the Netherlands East Indies back for the Dutch. And up it went. Wow. And as I say, we were on the side of the nationalists, and we were put under some sort of house arrest. We were somehow or other forbidden to get out of the cycle camp and get into the town. Then Edwina Mountbatten flew down. She found Les Boyderman, and she got him to take the 26th of us and flew them off to Labuan, I think. And it was the next day that I was flown out in her DC-3 to Singapore. We were deloused to get rid of all the organisms that were all over us.
Around what, can you recall the date you arrived?
Exactly, it was the 23rd of September 1942.
So 6 weeks after the end of the war.
That's right, yeah. And well, that video you showed me of Pat Gunther, she was saying she was about 3.5 stone. Well, I was about 6.5.
Yeah.
6.5 stone, about half my normal weight. We were pretty skinny, I tell you. And so we couldn't eat all that much because our stomachs had shrunk. And the Roman Catholic Church, in this school, St Francis School, where the nurses were and we were, they had a marquee, and they got 2 bottles of beer a day for each of us. We couldn't drink 2 bottles of beer. God, I tell you what. No, it was a different world. Norm Thompson, another Australian lieutenant, and I got out of the camp, and it was about 6 miles from Singapore centre. And we got down to Raffles Hotel, and there was the English Red Cross, and we went up there and said we'd like a cup of tea, and they said this is only for officers, and we said we are officers, and they said you don't look like it, and we said well neither would you if you'd been where we have been. Anyway, they didn't, and malaria was coming back on us, and somehow or other we got, some POMs took us back to the hospital. One of the things I regret, Peter, is that I didn't pinch a sword. There was I can still see this great heap of swords, and why I didn't take one, I can't imagine.
The Lieutenant Thompson, who you just mentioned, what unit was he from?
He was 2nd 40th.
2nd 40th. Right, thank you. Now, how did you get home to Australia?
We all wanted to come through Sydney Harbour, and we were put on a ship, the motor vessel, the hospital ship Mananda, and we were put on a ship in Sydney, in Singapore Harbour. We were there about 5 days while the battle was going on. The Western Australians wanted a hospital ship. We didn't want to come to Western Australia. We wanted to come to anyway. It was about 5 days, and I think we left there on about the 10th of October. I think we were on the ship from the 5th to the 10th of October. And finally we took off. We were escorted by the Japanese Navy through the minefields up the Malacca Strait. And then when they got to the top of Sumatra at Aceh, turned round and we came straight down. It was idyllic, except that on one occasion there was a broadcast over the tannoy, I think it's called, on the ship, that you prisoners of war shouldn't feel ashamed of having capitulated, and the country is proud of you, and all of a sudden you think, hell, what am I supposed to be ashamed of? I'm the one that's been betrayed. Not don't load your guilt onto us.
Where did that originate from? Do you have any idea?
Well, it must have come from the captain of the ship, or the officer, the medical officer in charge of us was a fellow called Lieutenant Colonel Charles Fortune.
He's a West Australian.
Is he? I remember him with extreme displeasure. He wrote a medical report. It was all sealed. We all opened it up, of course, and he put on it some anxiety symptoms. Well, I had alopecia, big holes, you know, where my hair fell out, and I'd lost 3 teeth. And I wasn't much of a specimen. So I had some. I was furious with him, and he distinguished himself even further by when we got to Fremantle. And you might have read what Jessica Simons has said about how we could first smell Australia, and then we could see it, and all of a sudden there was silence everywhere. And the nurses were looked after very well. They would take. Is it Holyrood?
Hollywood.